Our first guest is the author of the 2010 short story collection, The 12 Burning Wheels. His first published short story appeared in the Willows magazine in fall of 2008. Excuse me. His brand new serial novel, The 13 Secret Cities, releases April 28th of this year. Watch for it at the end of this month. For more info about that, you can visit 13, the numerals, 13secretcities.com. He is also the host of the Labyrinth podcast, where he interviews authors and explores topics in writing, philosophy, and publishing. Please welcome, direct from New York City, Cesar Torres.
Yes.
Okay.
April Fools. Hi. It's so good to be here. It's always great to be here. Chicago's originally home, so this is amazing. I'm going to read from my new novel, The 13 Secret Cities, for you. It's a novel that is a serial. It releases every 2 months this year, leading up to the finale in October, and then the paperback will be available at Christmas time. So I'm going to read from both paper and computer because of some logistical issues earlier today. But I want to dedicate this reading to, first of all, science fiction readers. That's what I love.
All right.
I grew up with it. It's part of what I write. And one of the reasons I wrote this novel is I thought, if people are willing to follow somebody like Katniss Everdeen to the Capitol, and they're willing to follow Percy Jackson to go fight Medusa, and if they're willing to follow Harry Potter to Hogwarts to fight Voldemort, I felt like there needed to be something for a character like mine. Her name is Clara Montes. She's 19. She's Mexican-American, and she lives in Chicago. And her journey is a journey literally into the underworld, the realm of the dead for the Aztecs. So, to set this up, you should know that the book kicks off with Claire being in a big riot in Millennium Park. So she's there as part of the Occupy Liberation Front, and there's 5,000 people gathered there. I followed the crosshatched dome of the Pritzker Pavilion, moving toward the silver wings that cradled the stage. I shoved my way forward, scared to be knocked over by someone bigger than me. A hiss and a whistle overhead tore through the din of the shouts. I looked up to follow the noise. Small objects streamed through the air, headed north in the same direction I was moving. The missiles left white trails as they soared. When they reached the stage, I heard the metal clink they made, just like beer cans. A white cloud bloomed immediately in 3 spots. When those of us who could see the stage saw the tear gas swell before us, our screams grew into shrieks. The protesters who had already gathered by the stage ran immediately away, but they weren't quick enough. The white smoke swallowed them up. The breeze blew toward the north, but Chicago wind was fickle, and it could turn right around toward the south at any moment. I thought about my parents and my brother, and it occurred to me that right now, my father was probably still at work at the botanical gardens. My mother was also probably at her office, and perhaps she was texting my brother as he arrived home from school, just to make sure he made himself a snack while he waited for her and my father to come home. This thought shifted and moved beyond my grasp as I ran, until it was gone. On my shoulders, I wore the shawl my mother had given me the day I moved away to college, and I wrapped it around my mouth and nose to keep the gas out. I fished in my pocket for my petrified moss, a good luck charm from my father that I carried on my keychain. I pivoted and ran toward the south, away from the stage. As I ran, I witnessed moments from my short 19-year-old life flash before me like water rushing down the side of a mountain. I relived the awkward pomp of my first communion, the climbs we made on the hills surrounding my grandmother's lopsided house in San Miguel, Mexico, the road trips through San Diego when I was a toddler. I lived through these moments fast again, and in them, I was the girl with the long face and the auburn eyes, a face I could see with precision, as if I were a cameraman shooting these memories. These visions of the past slid downward, vanishing as soon as they had arrived, gone in microseconds. And I ran. My legs pumped with fury and speed, but they were untrained and clumsy. I was not an athlete, and I had never been fit. And now the pounds of weight in my backpack on my back forced me to run without grace or agility. Now that tear gas was encroaching on the pavilion, slipping out of the straps could cost me precious seconds. About 200 feet in the distance, uniformed police were closing this perimeter, shouting and pummeling and bellowing through megaphones. I would never make it past them without being beaten down by their weapons and strength. I let my running stride slow down a bit, enough to shake off the pack, and to give me some time to think of where else I could run to. If I broke out toward the lake, to the east, I might be able to squeeze onto Columbus Drive and perhaps avoid the dozens of officers around us. My father had always warned us to avoid the lake, and instead, I ran straight toward it. I found the short concrete wall that lines the perimeter of the pavilion, just about 40 feet ahead. I zigzagged my way over to it. My long legs, which I had always been proud of, catapulted me over the short wall. But they were too long, in fact. My shoe caught the edge of the concrete. I flipped forward and landed hard on my hands and knees. These awful long legs, I thought. But I looked around me. I could now see the southern tip of the pavilion, and behind it, the glint of the BP bridge. I wrapped the shawl around my head one more time, though the gas was starting to creep into my eyes and sear them with pain. Other protesters were escaping through this very same route, where the police and SWAT were a little thinner. I realized I was free. Just as I came to standing, I heard the crack of gunshots behind me. One, then another, and then another. I heard new voices full of anger surging from the crowd. Other gunfire exploded, and this time it was different from the first 3 pops I heard. This rhythm was calculated and precise, perhaps an automatic weapon. The burst grew louder and moved closer to where I stood. Whoever was firing was cutting through the middle of the pavilion. I ran away from Pritzker, and I spotted an opening of about 30 feet with fewer officers where I could run through. I turned around one more time. Now, the SWAT team had joined the police. They wore gas masks lowered over their face, and their Kevlar gear protected them like scarab shells. They formed a dark ring around the cloudy oval, and they moved in tight, choking it out. They fired over and over. Their dark figures and hard helmets rendered them genderless, ageless, raceless. Soon, the thick gas engulfed the shapes of the SWAT men too, and the whole pavilion disappeared under the chemical mist. The screams were beginning to fade a bit, and I realized that the gas might be taking its effect now, silencing the crowd as it burned itself into eyes and throats. In front of me, I saw the street and the snaking structure of the bridge. Hundreds of people ran in every direction, pleading for help that was never going to come. I spotted an opening I could take, and I darted through. I ran up the curving path of the BP bridge. By now, I had stopped paying attention to the discomfort in my legs and the ache in my throat. I had become a runner. I didn't dare look behind me, though I could hear the cacophony still. The run over the bridge became a kaleidoscope of fear, my ragged breath, the pointed spikes of sailboats in the marina, and the silver reflections of water on Lake Michigan, where I was headed. Then I moved toward the exit, relieved. I dashed towards the drive, and I clutched the fossilized moss in my hand. I felt like a coward. I didn't know how to stay back there in the pavilion and fight back. But how could I? Someone was shooting, and all I wanted to do was run far, far away. And Edgar, who I had come to the march with, I had no idea what happened to him. I had a cell phone in my pocket, but my mind could not conceive of picking it up and using it. Instead, my legs did my thinking for me. If I reached the underpass after the exit onto Lakeshore Drive, perhaps I could catch my breath for a few moments and continue toward the lake. If hiding meant I had to jump into its icy waters, I was ready to do it. I felt a sigh of relief when I ran down the grassy slope that led to the overpass. Almost there. The flapping beats of helicopters overhead smothered my hearing. And then just 100 feet until I reached the underpass. At the bottom of the slope, I tripped again. My knees stung, but I did not care. I heard more shouts, more gunfire, and a whistling sound. Just 20 feet left. My legs pumped harder, and I could almost feel the cool darkness underneath the hard concrete of that structure. 5 feet left. I turned the corner into the safety of the underpass. I was not about to stop running until I was deep inside its cavern and safe. I had made it. My body slammed into a hard mass and bounced back, losing balance and falling backward. I looked up. 6 SWAT team officers stared down at me. The one whom I slammed into did not hesitate. He brought down the baton with a muscled arm. It swept across my face and connected with cheekbone. A deep crack sent a sliver of pain down my right eye and down my back. This is how my cheekbone was shattered in two, and the reason why I went permanently blind in my right eye. The nerve damage in my spine because of the blows was also a direct result of what happened to me in that underpass. When the officer's metal wand made contact, I bit down on my tongue, and blood gushed into my mouth. The baton also flayed open my cheek, and I knew that the liquid that ran down my cheekbones was not sweat, and it was not tears. I rendered my dignity as I curled up into a ball at the feet of those men. The dried moss my father gave me did not stop the violence, and it never could have prevented that officer from crushing my skull. In my pocket, I also carried a travel-size icon of the Virgin of Guadalupe, which my mother had given to me 3 months ago when I had moved from home to the university. She was a little Guadalupe, drenched in gold and red, boldly stepping over the horns of a demon and radiating light. Her eyes implied safety and love, but the protection I was supposed to receive from the icon never came to be. Even as I fell into a sleep, I went deeper into shock, and I remembered feeling cheated by these useless objects. And though I don't like to admit it, I hated my mother and father for instilling this false sense of security in me. I hadn't realized how superstitious my parents were until I thought about how a dried piece of moss and a laminated photo could be so utterly fucking useless. That was the hateful thought that crept into my head, and even as my vision burst into white stars and the officer fractured my bones, I kept on thinking that. He shouted many words at me, and his companions shouted too, words filled with hate and revulsion for me and the other thousands of people that had gathered at Millennium Park that day. I might count from the moment I lost Edgar until a SWAT officer split my face. 4 minutes had elapsed. That in itself is a lifetime. That 4-minute moment became one of the stars in the firmament of my life.